Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with a bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as Wood Elves with a bit of a rush strat against the Beastmen led by Mechanis 94 on the Northern Chaos Wastes. So, starting off, of course, throwing into slow-mo, I wanted to do a rush strat, and Beastmen are usually the ones doing the rushing, so it was a bit of I had some internal debating to do with what to run, what to bring, and that sort of stuff. I decided to bring Orion for my leadership. I think Orion is basically mandatory for rush strat, just like Durthu. It's great for a holding strat. And of course, coming in with Cloak of Isha, Foe Seeker, both his bombardment spells. I didn't bring Horn of the Wild Hunt because I figured I'd have to gap close very quickly, and I wouldn't have time to wait for it to get off cooldown. Alongside him, Branch Wraith, coming in with Call of the Woods, Earthblood, Smoke and Mirrors, and Melkot's Mystifying Miasma. Just there to kind of help stiffen up my front line. My front line is composed of leveled up Dryads, rank 2 and rank 1, I do believe most of them. Just there to kind of cause fear, dish out a lot of hurt to the whatever Beastmen infantry. They'll do well against any Beastmen infantry against Bestigors, and I didn't figure those were too likely with the fact that I'm playing Wood Elves. 2 units of War Dancers behind them just to shred through enemy infantry even quicker because they're very, very powerful against Beastmen units with their high damage. And high melee attack, and fairly high melee defense as well, given that they're a DPS unit. And then 3 units of Azrai Spearsmen in the back, one of which is the Regiment of Renowned Loex Tricksters, who have Frenzy and a bunch of different bonuses. They're basically here to deal with any Centaurs, any Cygors, any Minotaurs that manage to run, or Gorbulls that manage to charge through my line. And out on my flanks, 1 unit of Wild Riders over here with no shields, and then the Wild Hunters of Kurnus on the right flank. And these guys are, these guys do have the Guardian ability, so that they can potentially help Ryan stick around for longer. My opponent did decide to bring a somewhat interesting build, running Morgr, who is kind of a given, with all of his spawn. Behind that, the Eye of Morsleep, which is a bit of a centerpiece of the army here, which of course does have Warp Gaze, can lock down one of my units. Definitely something I'm a little worried about with an army like mine that's very reliant on being mobile and getting straight into the fight. And behind that, the Brave Shaman of the Wild, who can summon a Cygor, has the and does have Brace Scream, interestingly enough. So definitely pretty cool. And his front line is all Gors. It's the only exception is in the very center. It's I think 8 units of Gors. No, 9 units I think of Gors. And in the center he does have the Blackhorn Ravagers, or the Regiment of Renowned Gors with shields, with just higher stats and some other benefits, some higher armor I do believe. And then 2 units of highly leveled up Harpies in the air, and they're kind of just flying around, being a nuisance right now. I am pulling my Wild Riders away. I wanted to do some early scouting, see if I could reveal any stealth units, like for example Ungor Raiders, because I wasn't entirely sure what my opponent had brought. I didn't actually manage to pick up the Blackhorn Ravagers there though, because I didn't come close enough. And now I'm kind of committing to the charge with my Dryads, pushing into my opponent's infantry, but he does move to mirror me, probably expecting me to flank him, and this does screw up my charge here because my Dryads end up crashing into units that they weren't aimed for with their charge, which means they don't get their charge bonus off. Orion, though, is going straight in here, coming in to disrupt this Gore Herd, and alongside these War Dancers, alongside these Dryads, he will be able to absolutely shred through these units. My opponent, though, will be able to kind of flank here, which is definitely a bit of a problem for me. And of course, I need to tie down my opponent's right flank, my left flank, with some sorts of units. And so I'm throwing the War Dancers, the Azrai Spears in there, throwing the Dryads into the Meat Grinder, the War Dancers, all those units, just trying to tie my opponent down for as long as possible. The Loex Tricksters are getting thrown into an unwinnable fight here, really, trying to stall all these Gore Herds, as are these Wild Riders coming in from the flank, and these other War Dancers with Azrai Spears. Unfortunately, my opponent does get these Harpies into my back line. I do drop a Melkot's Mystifying Miasma, trying to damage him. But seeing that I won't really be able to save my Loex Tricksters, I decided to pull back, and I start pulling these Spears back, pulling the Wild Riders back. Over here, Morgr is trying to duel Orion, so I decided to oblige him and fight him. If I can time down away from my main fight, that's kind of ideal, because it means I can, he won't be able to summon spawn on top of important units. Dryads over here winning it out against Gore Herds slowly but surely. Over here, Wild Riders of Kurnus, the Hunters of Kurnus, driving off these Gores. Wild Riders routing these guys. The fear from the Dryads and the Wild Hunters and the Branch Wraith is causing immense amounts of work, stacked on top of the War Dancers who do a lot of damage. In spite of the healing, I'm not really able to stay around here. The Loex Tricksters are getting destroyed, and everything's kind of rolling into the central pocket. With me having crushed my opponent's right flank, and of course me having never really had much of a left flank. Everything's kind of, I'm falling back with these War Dancers, just trying to clear these Gores. I'm a little faster, which means that although I will probably use some units, lose some units on the retreat, it won't be too disastrous. And however, my Wild Hunters of Kurnus do catch these Gores out in the flank, do some damage to them, and then I'll be able to pull them back and clear, hopefully. So yeah, as you can see, fear causing these units to waver. My opponent's having Morgr out all the way out over here, This is a bit of a long drawn-out slugfest because Orion has very high damage resistance once he drops below 20% and HP regen, whereas Morgr, of course, has regen on his own, so, and he causes poison damage, so it's just a bit of a drawn-out fight. War Dancers over here tearing through the Bracement of the Wild. These other War Dancers coming back in, just coming to pincer my opponent's units. My opponent does summon a Cygor into the middle of my War Dancers' Azure Spears, which means it's not going to get very much done. As you can see, it has 0 kills right now. It's already at half health. It's getting absolutely shredded. These Harpies have taken flight. They're just not coming back down to the field. My leg strictures who are absolutely mauled. I'm throwing them back into the fight just to get whatever work they can get done. Wild Riders over here trying to intercept the Gores. Buy some time for Orion, and my opponent has now summoned the Chaos Bond. They will actually perform pretty well against Orion because Orion doesn't have much armor. He does have physical resistance, which is nice. Actually, he doesn't even have physical resistance, so he will melt very quickly at the Chaos Spawn, even despite his physical resistance. And my Dryades, of course, are getting absolutely demolished. So what I do is I throw my Wild Hunters of Kurnus over here, and they will provide him with an even greater damage resistance, which means he'll, at least for a little bit, which means that he'll have an 80% damage resistance. Unfortunately, I don't keep my Wild Hunters of Kurnus. I do believe I misclicked on them, thinking they were my normal Wild Riders in the heat of the moment, and so I pull them away, and that's definitely bad. As you can see, Orion's getting beat up, and he's dropped below 1,000 HP for the first time in the game. These Wild Riders just kind of drag my opponent off, trying to pull my Dryades back into the fray. My opponent has a lot of units hovering out on the edges of the field, and he's not really being on top of pulling back into the fight, which is definitely a good thing for me. These Dryades kind of sitting around over here, beat up, and I haven't really pulled them back in. These Dryades, though, doing work, still tearing through my opponent. These Gores getting shredded. A Brace Scream does go down, and it does some damage. Disrupts my War Dancers a bit, but I guess it does even more damage to these Gores, and it definitely forces them to rout. My War Dancers are trying to tie down the Cygor, or the Eye of Mor's Leap. It's not going too great for him, but now that War Dancers with Azure Spears there's Wild Riders coming in. The Wild Riders will help Orion clear up all my opponent's units there, including Morgr now, and that is going to cause the army loss rout. And it's very cool how resilient Orion can get. If you combine it with Wild Hunters of Kurnus, he gets Wild Riders of Kurnus. He gets Wild Hunters of Kurnus. Yeah, there we go. He gets 80% damage resistance once he's below 20% health. So that's absolutely immense. That means very little is getting through and doing damage to him, especially with his regen. As long as those units are around him. And yeah, definitely, I think this is a viable rush strat, and I do want to show one more game of Elven Rush, just to kind of show how I can function against some other factions as well. Of course, Orion got stuck down fighting Morgr, so not much done there. The Branch Wraiths, and as you can see, the Dryads and of course, the generic War Dancers did very well. The War Dancers with Azure Spears, this was not an optimal fight. They're more for quickly killing cavalry, and in a long, extended fight with infantry, they'll do fairly well because they're very hard to hit. They have very high melee defense, but they don't quite do that much damage. So it takes them a while to chew through a mob of infantry like Gore, so they didn't quite get that much done. I also do believe they attack slower than normal War Dancers, because that's how two-handed weapons usually work. And of course, the Wild Riders did absolutely immense amounts of work. I think a big part of it as well was fear. My opponent's units were constantly being routed off, and that meant they weren't staying in the fight, which meant I could kind of piecemeal take apart his army. The fact that he tried to be wider than me also hurt there, because some of his units just weren't in position to fight me. Especially with Smoke and Mirrors providing my whole army with a massive movement boost. For my opponent, I can't say any unit really shown, though the we've got a handful of kills, and the Gores, of course, some of them did fairly well. They did, of course, dish out quite a bit of hurt to the Dryads and quite a bit of hurt to the Loyal Strixters, who got torn apart completely between the Harpies and the Gores. It's definitely a good game to my opponent. I do want to hop on over to one other game with Elven Rush just to kind of show how it can work against some other factions. A faction that's more defensive. So, in this match over here against the Empire, led by Cabeza de Vaca, probably butchering that pretty bad, Kelp on the map, Kelp and Cold Dust. And as you can see, I changed the comp up a little bit here. So yeah. Running a bit of a different comp this time around. I'm still running Orion. I think Orion's kind of mandatory. I wanted to try to run the Horror of the Wild Hunt. I didn't notice that the map was very compact. I hadn't been paying enough attention to that, and I'd been hoping to kind of let it charge, and it didn't. And then I got on and found that this map, which is definitely not ideal for the rush strat. Well, it's fine for a rush strat, but it's not ideal for long cooldowns. And then Branch Wraith, of course, alongside him, coming in with the Withering and This time around coming in with Foe Seeker as well, in addition of course, Earthblood, Call of the Woods, Melkot's Defy Miasma, and Smoke and Mirrors. A front line this time around of only War Dancers. I only brought War Dancers with swords. And invested some points in leveling them up, instead of bringing Dryads. Because I figured Dryads wouldn't do as well against Empire with their armor and fairly high melee defense and potential for Flagellants who will tear through them pretty effectively. But and that 3 units of War Dancer with Azrai Spear, Empire of course can bring Demigryphs, can bring various types of cavalry. I definitely wanted to be ready to take that down. So I brought Lux Tricksters in the middle, once again 2 units of War Dancers with Azrais on the flanks. And then all the way out far in the woods over here, Wild Hunters of Kurnus with shields. The Wild Hunters are with Wild Riders with shields. And then over here, Wild Riders leveled up with 1 point. Level. My opponent, on the other hand, bring in a pretty a big Empire army. Centerpiece is Balthazar Gelt on a Pegasus, alongside a Light Wizard with Net of Mintok and Shem's Burning Gaze. Balthazar Gelt does seem to have brought is that Transmutation of Lead, I think, and I think it's Transmutation of Lead. And yeah, and Final Transmutation. This has gotten buff in the recent patch, and it's much better now. So it's considered like the new Fate of Buna by some people. So definitely very strong ability. Empire Captain over here, just to step over that front line. Yeah, a lot of infantry. A mix of spearmen with shields alongside swordsmen, and some halberdiers, just to tie down, because of course elves can bring quite a bit of large stuff, and a unit of great swords. Just to give some extra staying power. A unit of Empire Knights in the back here, and a skirmish line, and a Sigmar Sons, once again, more staying power. And 3 units of handgunners. Interesting picking against Wood Elves because they're pretty squishy. Wood Elves tend to outrange them, so handgunners can be a bit susceptible to just getting shot down. And then a great cannon over here. So definitely something I wanted to get clear of, and as you can see, I'm immediately rushing straight down through, trying to get underneath my opponent's guns, get underneath this glyph and be safe. I do scout forward once again with these Wild Riders. They do have shields, so they'll be fairly resilient against enemy ranged fire, because the Wood Elves are the only cavalry with silver shields, the Wild Hunters, or Wild Riders. These guys are just sitting around here. I don't want to push them out just yet. Don't want to reveal them and get shot by the Great Cannon. Just trying to get under my opponent's guns. My War Dancers did take a volley here, and now they're taking some volleys from the handgunners, but they're not particularly well sighted to shoot down on me, and I'm going to come in closer and hug the hill even more. Over here you can see the Wild Riders' shields are being pursued by the Empire Knights, and that is not a fight I want to take. I'm not actually sure if Wild Riders will win against Empire Knights in a straight up fight. It's possible they might, because they do have much better combat stats, but as you can see, some of my Wild Riders are getting caught and beat up a little bit, but I really don't want to risk it. It will not be a very cost-efficient trade for me, even if they can win. So we're just kind of waiting. I'm trying to get my Horn of Wild Hunt off cooldown so that I can launch a charge. I do drop Melkot's Defy Miasma on these guys. Bit of a waste. I've been hoping to slow them down enough for my Azrai to catch them, but it doesn't quite work out. So my opponent now is kind of pushing around the corner here with some of his infantry units. I do drop bombardment. I actually didn't see these handgunners, but I was just trying to bombard these halberdiers, do some damage to them. And as you can see, the bombardment actually does quite a bit of damage to Empire infantry. Never underestimate Orion's bombardments. They're very strong. Now my War Dancers get a charge in on these swordsmen, and as you can see, they're absolutely dicing them up. They're already down 10 models, and they're going to get shredded very quickly. Over here, though, I've managed to dash the Wild Hunters forward a little bit, still keeping my Wild Riders out over here on the flanks, just zoning away. And I don't want to commit my full force here. If my opponent doesn't commit fully to this, I'm not committing fully to this. This Great Cannon, though, is pounding away at my War Dancers, who I left exposed, and I'm definitely going to have to pull them, or try to pull them down, I think. I actually missed it here, which is definitely a bit of a problem. So they just take a lot of hurt. They lost 7 models there. These swordsmen are dead. Melkot's Miasma going down on these spearmen. An Overcast Earthblood going down on this group so that they stay in the fight longer. And I'm just kind of pushing forward with Orion, trying to beat up this Empire Captain and these spearmen, and just kind of tearing through them pretty quickly. The War Dancers will do very, very well against the Empire infantry like that. And over here, I do try to poke forward a little bit with the Wild Riders, getting a little bit cheeky, coming around with the Azrai Spears. I wasn't entirely sure how much infantry my opponent had brought, because the units were kind of moving in and out of vision because they were on a cliff, and I didn't have any way of scouting it out. Here, moment of lapse of micro. I hadn't been paying too much attention. I don't think my opponent was either, because all our attention was focused over here on the right flank, or my right flank, and so definitely a bit of a miss there, and I lose a Wild Rider, and now I'm trying to just flee for dear life. Fortunately, Horde of Wild Hunt has got down, which will help these guys. As you can see, the boost their speed up quite a bit, but now they're getting caught by Empire Knights, which is an absolute disaster. I do fortunately get him clear. Horde of the Wild Hunt has already worn off, but their speed's still high. Over here, my opponent did drop Balthazar Guilt. Not entirely sure why, what he was hoping to do. Pop standing ground, but that's not going to help against Orion. Orion is just laying the smack down this guy. Surrounded by War Dancers, surrounded by Wild Hunters of Kurnus. Now the Branch Shade's pushing forward to tie down these halberds, or try to. Empire Captain here getting torn through by the War Dancers, despite having pretty high armor. He won't hold out too well. Bombardment spell going down on the handgunners. As you can see, once again, quite a bit of damage. And over here, Wardancers with Azure Spears pushing it straight into these halberdiers. Orion is getting absolutely shredded by the handgun fire. I'm going to have to try to push into that as quickly as I can. I'm pushing Wardancers into the Empire Knights, or trying to. I'm trying to intercept them, trying to shut them down, because they will perform very, very well. This is this is practically an ideal matchup. A high armor, pretty low combat stat unit like Empire Knights against the Wardancers' disastrous form. But they do get this rear charge off of my Wardancers, which will do some hurt. But now they're bogged down, now they're trapped, they're pincered, and they're going to get torn apart by these Wardancers with Azure Spears. Net of a Mintok does go down. My Wild Hunter's Kurnus coming in from the flank, just trying to shut down all of my opponent's rage contingent. And because it was so clumped up over here as he was trying to deploy it, means that they're all going to get routed off. Some of the units are already shattered. These halberdiers fleeing for their life. This Light Wizard is trying to come in and slow things down, but that's not really going to work out. And these units are going to get overwhelmed. Great Cannon trying to crank itself around, fire in. It's just not working out. My opponent's infantry over here trying to come around the flank is way too slow. And in the meantime, the right flank is folded. Wild Hunters and Orion are just mopping up the back line. I'm throwing some of the Lux Tricksters and the Wardancers as I Spears into my opponent's back, just trying to kind of chase these units away. And as you can see, some absolutely routing, shattering over there. My opponent's infantry, though, this whole left flank is practically unblooded. So definitely trying to time down here. The Wardancers as I Spears, once again, will hold very well. They have very high defense. I do overcast an Earthblood here just to keep them in the fight a little longer, trying to tear through these Sigmar Suns, trying to tear through these, or tie down these halberdiers, tie down this captain. My opponent is trying to pursue these Wild Riders, which I think is a bit of a waste, because obviously the infantry's never going to catch them. In the meantime, though, I'm deploying to try to catch these Empire Knights, though I don't believe... Oh, they actually fear away before coming in. Definitely a bit of a win there for me. Orion is still over here. I'm not entirely sure what he's doing. I don't know if he's casting a bombardment, and I think that bombardment actually does more to me, damage to me than it does to my opponent, because I kind of missed. I didn't entirely see how many units I had there, where my opponent really didn't have much. And my opponent's army is completely shattered. The Empire Captain's practically dead. Only Sigmar Suns were sticking around, of course, and my opponent doesn't decide to end the game there. So as you can see, that didn't quite work out. I had a misjudged Horn of the Wild Hunt. Of course, the fact that it has a long cooldown is definitely inefficient. As you can see, very low losses against this sort of comp. And I don't think there's much. My opponent, if he'd run Flagellants, that would have definitely probably been a big threat to me. Crossbows with their high DPS could have been nasty, especially if backed, for example, with Lore of Fire, giving him magic damage to bypass the physical resistance on my units. But yeah, pretty brutal against standard Empire infantry. The vast majority, the only unit Empire has that will do well against Wardancers in a straight up fight are the Flagellants and the Great Swords. And my opponent's Great Swords were way out of position. As you can see, they shattered without having lost a single model, as far as I know. And his he didn't bring any Flagellants, so that means that the Wardancers basically get free reign. They could tear through anything they wanted to, especially when backed by Lore of Life from the Branch Wraith. Wardancers with Azure Spears did pretty well. Lux Tricksters actually did immense work, though I think it's because they got into my opponent's backline. The Knights got shut down pretty hard. Wild Riders got very little done. They spent most of the game running away and kind of tying my opponent's infantry down, baiting him away, and getting caught when I lost micro on them. On the other hand, Wild Hunters of Kurnus got immense work done because they wanted the preferable flank. Ryan, lots of work done, killed, or I guess shattered, brought the Balthasar kill. So yeah, I think a very solid performance for this army. I'm definitely pretty pleased with it. I didn't get much use out of the Horde of the Wild Hunt. I think that if you see that you're on a very big map, and you know for a fact that you can stall out for those 135 seconds, it can be good, because it gives you a massive charge bonus buff, as well as a speed buff, so you can kind of gap close a little quicker. But generally, I think it's not worthwhile. I think it's better to cram in an extra unit, perhaps strip off, especially if you can downgrade some of your other stuff. Like when I did my Beastman army, I cleared up a little space by dropping some of the Wardancers, getting some extra Dryads in just to get a little more manpower in there, dropping Foe Seeker on the Branch Wraith, dropping Withering. If you can drop some spells, find some place to cut corners, drop shields on the Wild Riders, and eke out a few extra units, it can definitely be worthwhile. So yeah, I think this is a very solid build for if you're trying to do an Elven Rush strat. This sort of design. Obviously, there are some flaws with it. There are some situations where it's not going to perform as great, but it is fun. It is a lot of fun for me, in my opinion, to just run a somewhat different Elven build rather than the usual either kiting spam or camping back with Treekin and Eternal Guard. So good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like or subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, and ideas for future comps you'd like to see, that sort of stuff, be sure to leave a comment down in the comment section, and I'll be sure to respond as soon as I possibly can. As usual, I appreciate you all for watching, and Wyvern out.